His mother kept an old letter under the floor. It was written by the house, not a person. I remember the day I found it so vividly, as if it were branded onto my retina. It was cold, that damp, penetrating cold that only exists in old wooden houses built on marshland. Mom had died a week earlier. A stroke. She collapsed right there, in the hallway, scratching the floorboards with her nails. I thought she was trying to get up. Now I knew she was trying to hold back whatever was clawing its way up from below. I pried open the floor with a claw hammer, hoping to find a stash, money for the funeral or at least some old jewelry. But only this sheet lay there. It wasn't paper. To the touch, the material felt like dried human skin, thin and parchment-like. There was no ink. The letters were formed by patterns of mold and microscopic cracks, coalescing into words. I didn't want to read it, but my eye caught the phrase, "The vessel is full. A replacement is required." The house groaned. It wasn't the usual sound of settling foundation. It was a sigh. A deep, satisfied breath of a creature awakened from a long sleep. I should have burned that abomination. Instinct screamed at me to run, abandon everything, leave the house to rot. But I was deep in debt. My mother's medical bills, my failed business attempts. I needed the money. The realtor, a woman named Sarah, was due in an hour. The house itself was worthless, but the land beneath it was a fortune. I shoved the letter into my jeans pocket. It was warm. Pulsating. "Just sell it," I said aloud, trying to drown out the silence. "Take the money and leave." I started cleaning up the hallway, hammering the nails back in. Each strike of the hammer echoed strangely in the walls, like a low growl. When the doorbell rang, I flinched. Sarah stood on the threshold, energetic, smelling of expensive perfume, completely out of place in this kingdom of rot. "Alex," she smiled a professional smile. "Let's take a look at your property. I have a client who's ready to place a deposit today." I let her in. I had made my choice. I decided to keep silent about the letter, about the sounds, about the wallpaper in the foyer that felt like mucous membrane to the touch. I chose the money. Sarah walked into the living room. I hesitated by the door, feeling the letter in my pocket heat up, scorching my thigh. And then the front door slammed shut. By itself. I yanked the handle. Locked. I tried to turn the deadbolt, but the key wouldn't budge, as if the mechanism inside had fused into a single piece of metal. "Alex, do you have ventilation issues here?" Sarah's voice changed. "It smells like meat." I turned around. The windows in the living room were gone. In their place was a solid wall, covered in pulsating mold veins. The house had sealed us inside. "What is happening?" Sarah backed away from the wall, her professionalism evaporated, leaving only raw, animal fear. "Where are the windows?" I didn't answer. I slammed my shoulder against the door, but the wood felt hard as stone. I could feel the house contracting around us. It was like being inside the stomach of a colossal beast. "We have to find a way out," I rasped, trying not to look at how the ceiling was slowly sinking. "Maybe through the basement." There was a window to the outside. It was a foolish decision, dictated by panic. We headed toward the kitchen, to the basement door. Sarah followed me, sobbing. Every step was a struggle, the floor had become viscous. My boots stuck to the boards, and each time I lifted my foot, I heard a squelching sound. We went down. The basement was dark, but not pitch black. The walls glowed with a faint phosphorescent light, the fungus covering everything emitted this sickly shine. The window I had hoped for was overgrown. Not with dirt, not with boards. It was overgrown with bone tissue. A white, porous mass filled the opening. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. She pointed to a corner. My mom's old sewing machine stood there. But it was running. The pedal moved by itself, the needle tapping with furious speed. Under the needle lay a piece of that same skin-like material from which the letter was made. New words were appearing on it. She is delicious. But you are the debtor. Sarah screamed and bolted back toward the stairs. I tried to grab her, to stop her, but the house reacted faster. The stair tread suddenly became slick and smooth, like an esophagus. Sarah slipped, falling face first. I heard a crunch, the sound of a breaking nose. I rushed to her, helping her up. Her face was bloody, but the blood didn't pool on the floor. The floor absorbed it. Greedily, instantly. As soon as a drop touched the wood, it vanished, and the boards brightened, taking on a pinkish hue. "It's eating us," Sarah whispered, looking at me with frantic eyes. "It's just digesting us." We huddled in the kitchen corner, away from the walls. The letter in my pocket burned unbearably. I pulled it out. The text had changed. Now it read, "Give up the stranger. You will remain whole." I looked at Sarah. She was shaking, pressing a handkerchief to her face. If I gave her up, if I left her here, would the house let me out? A spiral of guilt and terror twisted within me. I brought her here. I knew something was wrong. This was my trap, and she merely walked into it. "Alex, I have children," she suddenly said, looking at the sheet in my hand. She couldn't see the text, but she felt it. "Please." At that moment, the kitchen walls trembled. Plaster crumbled, revealing red, moist flesh underneath. Black sludge spurted from the sink faucet. The situation was spiraling out of control. The house was losing patience. I had to act. I remembered how Mom always kept a jar of salt and matches by the stove. Old superstitions. Maybe they worked. I dashed to the cupboard. The salt crumbled in my hands, turning into gray ash as soon as it hit the air. The matches were damp. And then it hit me. The letter. It was part of the house. Its DNA. If the house cherished these messages, they must be important. "I have an idea," I shouted to Sarah. "Get behind me." I pulled out the Zippo lighter I always carried. Flipped the lid. The flame flickered weakly, trembling. I held the fire to the edge of the letter. The house howled. It was the sound of hundreds of voices screaming in unison, men's, women's, children's. The walls shook so violently that dishes flew from the shelves. The letter in my hand shrieked with a thin, piercing sound. It wasn't burning. It writhed, turning black like living tissue. "Open the door," I screamed into the void. "Or I'll burn it to ashes." For a moment, it seemed to work. The front door in the hallway clicked. The walls stopped pulsating. "Run." I grabbed Sarah's hand and dragged her into the hallway. We reached the door. I lunged at the handle, and it yielded. Fresh, cold air hit my face. Freedom. Sarah scrambled onto the porch, crying with joy. I stepped out after her. But my foot didn't touch the porch. I was yanked back with such force that I nearly dislocated my shoulder. I looked down. The floorboards near the threshold had split, turning into wooden tentacles that clamped onto my ankle. "Sarah!" I yelled. She turned around. She was already on the gravel path, safe. She looked at me, then at the house, which was swelling up behind me like a toad. I saw a struggle in her eyes. And then she spun around and ran toward her car. "I'm sorry," came her faint cry. The door slammed shut in front of me with the clang of a prison gate. I was alone. The letter dropped from my hand onto the floor. And then I saw the truth. I thought I was threatening the house by trying to burn the letter. But when I bent down to pick it up, I saw that the fire had only peeled off the top layer of skin. A new text emerged beneath it. Deeper. Older. The heir has taken the rights. The contract is sealed by betrayal. It was a trap. The house didn't fear the fire. It waited for me to commit the betrayal. By allowing Sarah to leave and staying behind, I didn't just become a victim. I fulfilled the condition. I sacrificed myself, but in the house's logic, I let the witness go to keep the secret. I had taken my mother's place. I lay on the hallway floor, feeling the wooden tentacles slowly pulling me inside the house. Not to eat me, though. They dragged me to the center, to the very room where Mom had died. Fear was gone. In its place was an icy clarity. I understood why Mom never left. Why she was so pale and weak. She wasn't guarding the letter. She was writing it. The house was draining her life, drop by drop, turning her vitality into these cursed messages that sustained its existence. Now I was the new battery. I was dragged to the center of the living room. The floor beneath me became soft, like clay. I started sinking, not down into the basement, but into the structure of the floorboards themselves. I felt the wood fibers growing into my clothes, into my skin. "No," I whispered. "I will not be your scribe." I fumbled in my pocket for the nail I had picked up when I was fixing the floor at the start of this nightmare. An ordinary, rusty finishing nail. The house expected submission. It waited for me to surrender, as Mom had surrendered for years. It was ancient and powerful, but it was predictable. It understood biology: eat, grow, multiply. But it did not understand hatred. I didn't try to break free. Instead, I drove the nail into my left palm. The pain was blinding. Blood spurted onto the floor. The house gave a satisfied rumble, soaking it up. It thought it was being fed. "Like it?" I hissed, gritting my teeth. "How about this?" I began to scratch, not the floor, but the veins on my own wrist with the nail, not to die. I was tearing myself open to mix my blood with the rot I had in my pockets, with the remnants of plaster, with the mold I had scraped off the walls while we were panicking. I was creating a poison. An infection. I remembered that Mom died of a stroke. A clot. Blockage. I rolled onto my stomach and forcefully jammed my bleeding hand into the gap between the floorboards, right where the main artery of the house was pulsating. "Eat up, you bastard." I poured all my rage, all my rotten, failed life, all my debts and fears into the house through my blood, imagining it as thick, black tar. I wasn't giving it vitality. I was giving it death. I was giving it the will to die. The house shuddered. The rumble turned into a cough. Cracks spread across the walls. It hadn't expected the battery to be toxic. It was accustomed to my mother's fear, to her obedience. My fury was like acid to it. The wooden tentacles slackened their grip, twitching in convulsions. The floor spat me out. Chunks of flesh rained down from the ceiling. The house was dying from poisoning, a transplant rejection. I crawled toward the exit. The door hung on one hinge. I stumbled out onto the street, into the mud, the cold, the rain. I didn't look back. Behind me, there was a sound like a gigantic abscess bursting. The house settled, collapsing into itself, turning into a pile of rotten boards and sludge. I lay in the grass, looking at my mutilated hand. The scars would remain forever. I survived. A month later, I sold the land. Sarah, of course, never returned. Another agent handled the deal. He said the soil there was strange, nothing grew, not even weeds. Yesterday, I received a letter. An ordinary envelope, the postmark smudged. Inside was a blank sheet of paper. Clean. But when I picked it up, dust remained on my fingers. The dust of old plaster. And for a moment, just a second, words appeared on the clean sheet, written in my handwriting, but not by my hand. "We are still hungry. I burned the letter in the sink. But now I know, I didn't kill it. I just became the carrier. And every house I enter will now know that taste.